Greetings.
Hi.
Greetings from California. How are you, Aunt Lois? And Mary Beth, nice to see you too.
We
You
can't
guys
see
have
her.
volume okay over there?
Volume's okay.
All right.
Hi.
Hi, Rosemary. How fun. Now you are back in the US, aren't you?
Oh, yeah, I'm back. And yeah, I feel so bad about this morning. Here I am, the weakest link, and I'm the one that's going to be late for this meeting. So
Oh,
thank you for changing the time.
I don't think it was a problem.
Not at all.
Very good. Well, so what
How are you?
oh,
I'm
go ahead.
sorry.
How are you, Aunt Lois?
Oh my gosh, I am just doing fine. Better than I should be, I think.
That's great to hear. Great to hear. So when my mom was down, I don't know, February or so, she brought down a lot of photographs that you had sent some years back to our family, and so I put them onto into some slides. And so what I thought that we do is kind of go through those. Ask some questions. You can share anything that you remember about the
Yes.
people in the pictures and things like that. I'm recording our meeting so that then afterward I can send it out to family members, and I'll be sharing the slides, showing the slides on a shared screen, and then I can also send out the document itself with the slides, which have all these different pictures from
Oh,
especially the early Steenhausen years.
I'm
okay.
impressed.
This is
Sounds good.
exciting.
So that's been a fun project, but one that I really wanted to do. I wanted to hear some more about in particular, the Steenhausens and the Taylors. Of course, I mainly have pictures of the Steenhausen side, but I do have some from the Taylor side of Bernice and her brothers and Lillian, of course. So I'm going to share the screen here and bring
Okay.
up the pictures. This is let me change this here.
Oh, yes.
View. All right, so this one here on the title slide, what I have here, these are actually photographs that I have up in my house, Aunt Lois. This one here,
Yes.
do you recognize that picture of your parents and when maybe that was taken?
Yeah, very much so. In fact, well, my dad, of course, was not Catholic, but all of his friends were, and my mother, and once a year they would have this boat trip up to Mackinac Island. And that's where my parents met for the first time. And then they did go back the next year. Now I don't remember with with my dad's arm around my mother if that would be when they first met, or but whatever it was fine. And oh my gosh, I love the cap my dad is wearing. That was such a thing of the 20s, I guess.
Yeah, so the photograph here was taken when on the second trip in 1924.
Oh, okay.
So on the back of this photograph, my dad hand wrote like a caption, but so they had met a year earlier, as you know, and then this is now a year later. So I used to actually show this picture when I was a history teacher to my students that are learning about the 1920s. I said, look how scandalous my grandma is, showing off her legs like that, with arms around it. That's like pretty risque stuff for 1924. And I was curious about this, Lois, Aunt Lois, if you know. So they met a year earlier. They both lived in the Chicago area. Do you have any idea if they communicated in the meantime or saw each other during that year? If they lived relatively closely, or if it was just like writing letters, oh, we should go on that trip again type communication?
I really don't, I'm not sure about any of that, except that my mother was born and raised in their house at, let's see, 5034 West End Avenue. And it was in the area of Chicago called Austin. And my parents, after their first apartment, rented the apartment across the street from them. We were 1531, which is how I grew up. But my dad was from the South Side. And I think because, his father was here a year before my grandmother and the rest of the children were able to come. And one of the things that they needed to do was they had to have a place to live, and they had to have someone sponsoring them. And my grandfather did all of that the year ahead of my mother. So she was at home in Holland for a year, and they were all taking English lessons at the University of Groningen to come over the following year. And there were many more rules then, certainly, than there are now about immigration. So there was a Dutch community on the south side of Chicago. And so that was where my dad and his father knew some people there, and they went first to meet with them, and that was the connection with the south side of Chicago. So how he got with this, oh my gosh, what was the organization called that of all the Catholic men? I don't know, maybe through softball, because my dad, very young, was on a softball team. And a lot of those men were also, and their girlfriends. But other than that, I'm sorry to say, I don't even know anymore.
So not sure if they saw each other during that year in between 1923 when they met on the cruise on Lake Michigan, and then a year later. And then this photograph here, this is from Christmas time 1943. So my dad would have been 10. And then are you 2 years younger?
Well, actually, just 15 months.
Okay. Just
younger.
15. Okay.
And that was the apartment that we lived on the first floor across the street from my grandparents, which was in the area called Austin. And gosh, your brother Paul and
Yes,
his whole family.
Mark
Yeah.
and Lisa and the girls and me, we all went with you.
Yes, and we went into this
We went
house.
into the house, and then I sent them this picture.
Yeah.
People who live there. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I remember my dress was velvet, and it was either navy blue or black. I mean, everything was so well, and the ties and the jackets and the handkerchief in my brother's lapel pocket. I mean, all of that is so cool. And that was my mother's chair, and that was my dad's lounge chair. And they would sit there every night and read the newspaper after dinner when my mother was through cleaning up in the kitchen. And then my brother and I'd be doing homework in the dining room, I suppose. But oh my goodness, some of those things I still remember. That there are a lot more memories for me, of course, than there would be for you. But that was the tree.
So the house, you said it was West Adams, right? Is the street?
No, it was West End Avenue.
West End Avenue. Okay, so then that home was, because I was reading something you had emailed to me over a decade ago before we were meeting and reminding myself, but it all was the like a larger home that belonged to Lillian's parents, right? And then they divided up into apartments.
No, actually, their house across the street was one of the first ones built in that area. And everything then was what they called a residence, meaning bedrooms upstairs, kitchen, living room, dining room on the first floor, and a full basement. And they were about the first ones on the block. But then as time went on and they started doing more building on the west side, they started building what we called two flats. So this is the one that you're looking at now. Usually the owner rented the first floor or used the first floor, and the second floor was done for the renters. But in this case, the owner of the building was living there with her daughter, son-in-law, and 4 children. So they took the more bedrooms on the second floor, and we got the first floor. And we rented there until after World War II. My mother was devastated when the daughter of the owner said they wanted this apartment because her 2 sons were coming home from the war, and one of them needed a place to live, was married and all that. And that forced my parents to move out of their apartment. But they thought from, I think I was about 2 or 3 years old when we moved in there until I was starting high school. So we just considered that our home.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna move on to
Yeah, I hope I'm telling you things you want to know or ask me.
Yes, no, this is great. So here, this is a summary from my dad of on the family tree side. So I'll just kind of give an overview here, and you can share anything that you like.
Oh,
But
that's
we
very-
have grandfather Jacob Bernard Steenhausen, born November 3rd, 1895, and Lillian Helen Taylor, and their parents, Jacob's parents, Jan Elmer and Jenny Pilon. Say it with a Spanish accent for some reason. I don't
Yeah.
know why, but
That's 'cause you're in
habit, I
California
guess.
now.
And then David Joseph Taylor and Mary Frances Kinney, which I have some pictures of her here in a little bit that I'll share. But oops, you mentioned the the siblings of your dad's siblings.
Yes,
And so some of them changed. Some of them I guess left their name as Steenhuisen, and then a couple changed it to Stonehouse. Do you remember or know anything about why or at what point Steenhuisen,
yes,
Stonehouse in Dutch became Stonehouse or Steenhausen? And I don't know. Any thoughts?
yes. Some I've learned about recently. Do you remember I sent you that picture? I have another one of the man who was elected mayor of oh my gosh, in South Africa.
Oh,
And his name was Steenhuisen.
Hmm.
That in English means stone house. And at one time, a person who knew both languages said to my dad, "Oh, somebody in your family must have done quite well because they lived in a stone house." And that was the name Steenhuisen. And the mayor of this city now in South Africa is Steenhausen, but it's spelled Huisen instead of Zen. But I'm sure he's a long generations ago cousin.
Uh-huh.
And because
Oh,
the Dutch had such big settlements in South Africa and
so the
other.
correct pronunciation would be Steenhuisen, because I've said
Correct.
Steenhuisen over the years, but
Correct.
Steenhuisen. Okay.
And my dad told me that when they entered through Ellis Island, his father had been here a year before, which was according to the rules, had a place for them to stay and a job and things like that. But the man who checked them in at Ellis Island said Steenhausen, and Hausen is actually German. I don't know if Mary Beth remembers, but at the Marriott Theater, you met some men from Holland at the bar, and when you told them your name was Steenhausen, and they said, "Well, that's not the Dutch name. It would have been Steenhuisen." And they said, "You have a name that's half Dutch and half German." So it just depends on who checked them in at Ellis Island. There must have been lines of people and
Yeah.
dozens of people letting everybody doing their papers for them. So let's see. My Uncle Elmer and my Aunt Gertie were twins, and they were the firstborn.
oh,
And my dad was next. So he was the third child. And then it went, well, we called Henry, we called Heinz, and then John, because my father was Jacob.
Hmm.
And then the youngest son was Peter.
So he was just a little boy when they came over, Peter, because he would have been like
Yes.
4 years old or something.
Well, there you are. And my mother always referred to them as the boys. And that was my dad's brothers. And they all lived together for a very long time. And with their mother, of course. And when my mother and dad were engaged, and she told him she really wanted to get married. And he said, "But Lillian, I can't. I have to live at home and help my mother out financially." And so I don't know how much later they decided they could break it to her that my dad was going to marry, which would mean he'd be moving in his own place.
Hmm.
oh,
And when my brother Ray was very young, a baby even, my grandmother wanted to make a trip back to Holland because it was after World War I. And she asked my mother and dad, with my brother Ray to come and stay with them. And my mother would keep house for the boys. And then Gertie was not yet married yet to Chester, but my grandmother said, ew, Gertie in her Dutch accent can't do a darn thing in the house. And she knew that my mother was a Dutch kind of housewife, which was my mother, you know, Rosemary, perfectionist.
Yes, I loved it.
So they lived with my grandparents, with my grandmother. Somewhere in there, my grandfather died, and I don't know where, except I know he was very young, very religious. My mother said she was afraid to talk to him. They'd be over visiting on a Sunday, and he'd be sitting in the corner meditating or praying or something, and she'd kind of creep by him. And I think it was my grandmother was the one who decided that they would come to America, because at that time they had the Dutch Foreign Legion. And she said, I will not have my sons all going in the Dutch Foreign Legion. We're going to America. And that's how they kind of connected with my cousin who was already over here.
Mhm.
And evidently my grandfather said, okay, if you insist. But their house was a tiny 1 or 2 room. It certainly wasn't a brick. Oh, at one point stone house, maybe it was stone when they lived there, but it had no electricity, no running water. It had one fireplace. And I remember my brother Dave, you know, we called him Ronnie at the time, said to my dad, well, what did you do after dark when you had no electricity? He said, everybody went to bed. He said, well, were all the beds just stacked there? Well, evidently they were into the wall, like bunk beds. I stayed at a vacation home like that once, where you could be 2 or 3 levels high, a bed, 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 and then the next part of the wall, bed, bed, bed. And he said that's the way they lived. They knew America was going to be much greater than that, which of course it turned out to be in so many ways.
I noticed here, Lois, that Dad, Jan Elmer. I see my dad wrote here that he died in September of 1924, which was just a few months after that first picture that we saw of them meeting on the ship. So Lillian probably didn't even meet him very much.
Sounds like that's the truth. And if he was so quiet and or so reserved or something, she would not have tried to make much contact. But living with my grandparents, her in-laws, she got to know my father's mother very well. Mm-hmm.
And then this, I won't read through here. I'll kind of, and you've mentioned a lot of this. This is from an email my dad sent me many years ago about Groningen, which actually for this here, what I want to do is to kind of change my background here. My mom and as you know, and my brother Paul and Sarah and their family, they were recently in Groningen, and they went to visit.
Yeah.
They went by Spartaveg, so let me stand off to the side here.
Yes, I'm so glad you sent me that very picture.
Yes, there they are in front. And I've and she mentioned that they were there, and then I was there back in like 1999, 2000, something like that, and took a very similar picture. So I had that one, and then this is one of Paul and Sarah walking on the street in front, which my dad references in this piece here. If I stand off to the side.
Yep, that's it.
And the
bike walking away there, but so I'll just kind of skim some of the key parts. But site of a major university. That's like 50,000 people or something, I think, go there. It says he was born there November 3rd, 1895, and you shared a lot about the family already and about the mandatory military service, and that their father was a typesetter, which was a skilled trade, so easier for him to get a job in the States when he moved here. And you mentioned how they had tutoring in English, his wife and the 5 kids back at home. And then I have the Ellis Island record I'll show here in a moment, and a picture of the ship that they were on from the ellisislandrecords.org site. But that was in the summer of 1906. that as he wrote down there. I think on the actual display I'll show you, it shows June, but anyway, it was the summer of 1906. Talking about the clothing. My grandfather, his dad used to say he was so hot in his woolen Dutch clothing.
Yeah.
And let's see, John played the accordion.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, so then he learned that the area was bombed by the Axis powers in World War II, and then it was rebuilt with the same addresses and everything, which I think is really cool.
Isn't that amazing? So that number 3 then was his address.
Yep.
But we don't know the street name, do we?
Yes, Zwarte Weg, which in Dutch means black stick.
Oh my gosh, how about that? Oh, Zwarte Weg, I see it there.
Yeah, right there.
He just went on to Google and put in number 3 Zwarte Weg, and it took us right to that street and right to the house.
Isn't that incredible? And those the brick sidewalks in front, I'll bet those are the originals from over 100 years ago.
Yeah.
All right. So here's the Ellis Island record. Your grandfather, Jan Steenhausen, and it is written down as Steenhausen if I were to zoom in on that. It is age 39. So this is something else I used to share with my students when they were learning about this period of history, learning about immigration during this time period. I got the date of June 26th, 1906, when he arrived. So maybe then the others came the following summer, maybe that was in August then of 1907. But all these different questions here on the back, my dad took the time to I'm going to stop the shared screen here for a minute. Actually, no, I want to have that on there so we can kind of see it. It's kind of off to the side there, but anyway, when I send the document to you, you'll be able to see all the different questions that were asked. You can kind of get a sense of it by his answers here. But a couple of things that stood out to me is that when he when Jan Elmer came to the U.S., he had $10. That's what he reported as having had, which my dad calculated was about $200. And more modern.
Isn't that amazing?
More modern money. And then, they'd ask, are you a polygamist, an anarchist? Do you handicapped and all that kind of stuff? And it's got the spot here on Armitage Avenue in Chicago, where he had a brother-in-law that he was going to be living with, Austin Juke.
I don't recognize the name. Oh, Ozenchuk. Yes. They were at our house, our apartment a couple of times, the Ozenchuks. I remember those names. Or that was how I learned to say the Juk, like a CH.
And down here is the ship that arrived here in June of 1906, and a little history, a little information about the ship and how it was, how long it sailed the seas. And then I'm sure you've seen this before. This is something else that I've had displayed, whether in my classroom or on my wall here at home, which is his discharge papers from the war. Real quick before we continue on, I have a special guest I'm going to be bringing in here. My daughter Ava.
I'm sorry, who is it?
This is my daughter Ava.
Ava, oh honey, hi! I'm so happy to meet you.
Yeah, when Allie got married a couple of years ago, she was in a play here in a community theater play that they had it was like during the period of time right before the play started, so she wasn't able to come on the trip because she had that commitment. But
I do remember that.
My dad's younger sister, Lois, and you recognize grandmother, of course.
I'm actually wearing the dress that I was going to wear for the wedding. It's like can't really see it.
Oh, really? Oh, Ava, how darling
of
you remember that. Oh, that's lovely. Well, I'm glad we're getting to meet now. Golly.
Adorable.
She'll start her sophomore year in high school next week, but she's still on summer break, so she's.
Oh gosh, perfect timing, Drew. You really did. Say, one of the Dutch customs before you leave this, My father's father was Jacob. What was his second name? John. They reversed names. My father being the older son, he became Jacob Bernard. So his father was Bernard Jacob, and then it would have continued that way in the Dutch way that they
Oh, okay.
switched the first and second name. It was traditional. Just a
So,
little aside, he told me one time.
so that would be like me naming my son instead of David Ronald, he'd be Ronald David, like
I guess so.
skipping
Yeah.
a generation. Oh, okay.
Yes.
So here's his, the honorable discharge after World War One. Down here, I think this is interesting. All the different battles he was in, and the Army of Occupation, and his signature down here signed Steenhausen. He's
Steenhausen, sure
still going
enough.
by that name there, which I remember thinking about and sharing with my students, that it was interesting to me that sometime after World War One that the poison became Hausen, because with Hausen being the German spelling, while much of America was kind of like rejecting anything
Yes,
German, like
yes.
hamburgers were liberty meat, and dachshund dogs were supposedly kicked in the streets or whatever. That the name would change to something sounding more German, when a lot of times I think people were trying to distance themselves from any kind of German connection, at least right after the war.
Yeah,
So
that is fascinating.
and then here is a summary. Again, you'll be able to see it better on the document that I send with the slides when it's more up close. But my dad has written on here some of the key dates of his service during the war, along with some key. He told me stories over the years,
Oh.
and of your dad's service, and a couple that he refers to here. This is in July of 1918, ends up being just about 4 months before the war ends in November. But he mentions this. Have you got? Do you know the story, Aunt Lois, about have you got cooties from the Australian?
Oh, yes, when they stayed at the baker's house.
And
The men in those days, I don't know what it's like in service today or anytime since, were able to leave their when they got into a favorable area. They didn't have a place to stay, and they were the war that they were in the trenches, and the trenches were full of what they called cooties, which I guess are like bed bugs. And my dad and one of his buddies went into a town, and I don't know, I'm guessing it was France, because they were occupied by Germans and other armies. And there was always a bakery, and they left that open because that's really what the people lived by, that they could have bread to eat when there was almost nothing else. And the man offered my dad and his friend a bed for the night. And he said he had a feather bed on the second floor. And my dad and his friends said, "Oh, we can't sleep in your feather bed. We have cooties." And the man said, "French have slept here. Dutch have slept here. What another ethnic background has slept here. Americans sleep here too, even with cooties."
Oh, that's a great story. I never heard.
I know another time he and his friends slept in a dog house, and they must have been on an estate of property that would have had huge hounds and for hunting and dogs. But everything was gone. The people and everything that they treasured, including their animals, gone. And my dad and his friends slept in the doghouse because it was dry and clean and the wind didn't get to them. It was a miserable, miserable winter, probably in France.
And then the reference here to "I ain't dead yet," you know what that's referring to?
No, I don't. Is that my dad telling about people that they had lost?
So the way that my dad told the story to me, your dad, as you know, was a victim of a chemical gas attack by the Germans when he was in the trenches. And according to my dad's telling of the story to me, and what I recall is that that my grandfather, your dad, woke up in a church looking up at stained glass windows, and he's lying on the floor, or maybe on a cot of some sort. I don't know, but he looks around, looks to his left, looks to his right, and sees just a whole line of wounded, and in some cases dead. And he saw that there was a doctor and a nurse holding a clipboard or something, and a doctor with a stethoscope going down the row, person by person, checking their vitals. And when he would come to somebody that was not alive anymore, he'd shake his head, and the nurse would put the sheet up over their head, and make a note on the clipboard. And then when they got to the guy next to Jacob, he took the vitals, checked for a heartbeat, breathing, shook his head, and as the nurse was bringing the sheet up over his head, your dad heard him grumble, "I ain't dead yet."
Oh,
The guy next to him. And so, according to my dad, the telling of the story, your dad's like, I'm out of here. And so, for whatever he could do to expedite getting out of there, but that's the I ain't dead yet.
God, isn't that amazing?
But it makes me think, Aunt Lois, I was just thinking about this earlier today, and I've shared this with hundreds of students over the years. I think back to that, to him almost dying in the trenches of World War I, and how if that had happened, none of us would be here. Obviously, my mom would be here, but I wouldn't be here, and you wouldn't be here, and your kids wouldn't be here, because Joe Paleman would have married somebody else, and and so I just think about that. This is such a pivotal time here in July of 1918, when our entire so many members of our family would they would never have existed if that had gone differently during the war. And then here's a picture after the war. This is in Nice, France, and I've looked at it up close, and I'm pretty sure this you can look at it more closely when I send you the image, but I believe that is, looking at the line here, is like the one that most resembles Jacob Steenhausen, but that's a picture from after the war. And then this one too, I think, I don't know if because down here in the at the bottom, I don't know if there's a caption you wrote, Heinz and John ? If maybe this was the brothers together after the war, maybe they took a picture.
Well, that sure looks like my dad in uniform.
Yeah.
Yes, I think so too.
Doesn't it, Rosemary?
And I don't know if one of his brothers was in the Navy. I presume that's a Navy kind of uniform with the tie in front there.
It certainly is. And I don't recognize that any of them looks like the people I remember, because I remember them as much older men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and they, I remember they lived on Arlington Lane in Chicago all together.
So we saw this picture before, but here's some notes of, actually, no, so it's 1920. Okay, so I'm a year off. So they met in 1922. Then they were on the the same trip a year later. And then so she had known, because I was saying, she'd probably only known, had only met his dad a couple of times before he passed away in 1924, but it would have been a good year or so that they were dating or whatever he did back then. So yeah, it's got the information here about the his different names over time. So he went at this time, my dad has written here that he was going by John Steenhausen. So I don't know, are you aware that he had Steenhausen, Steinhaus, and then settled on Steenhausen later?
Well, it's his brother John, because my dad was Jacob. So maybe my Uncle John went by Steinhaus when my dad was still Jacob. And my mother didn't like it because Jacob was such a foreign name. Funny, it's so popular now with children, but she insisted on calling him Jack. So people guess his name, full correct name was John, but all my mother's friends knew him as Jack Steenhausen.
Okay.
Right.
And he actually was Jacob, and he had a brother, John.
Okay, gotcha. And here's a picture from, and a lot of these are pictures that you
Yeah.
to my mom, and that she brought down. But this is from that trip in 1923, that follow-up
Okay.
subsequent trip. We can see Jack here and Lillian here with looks
Ye-
like a fun group of people out there
Yes.
on a week-long cruise or so on Lake Michigan. And then they
Yeah.
are married then in June 1925.
Oh,
And
golly.
and so this is here. This is Bernice, here on the far left, and then I think it's cut off on my screen, but John Taylor. So John is Lillian's older brother.
No, he was the youngest of the four children.
Okay.
So, oh my gosh, I don't recognize anybody in that group of people except my mother and dad, who are labeled
Little,
Lily.
that little Bernice with a little hat.
You think Bernice is in there?
Oh,
No,
that's,
she Lois is talking about this picture on the left
oh,
on the
over
ship,
there. Okay,
but
sorry.
yeah, on the right
Oh,
here, yeah,
you're looking
definitely.
at that wedding picture. Yes. Yes, my Aunt Bernice was the maid of honor, and my Uncle John was my dad's best man.
Oh,
That's
that's
that.
nice.
Yeah.
All right, and here this is when Ray, around the time Ray, I don't know, he looks a little older to be coming home. What year was he born in, Lois?
Well, let's see, he's 9 years younger, so I was 35, so he would have been 26.
26. Okay, so yeah, 19. This is probably 1927. Then he looks to be about one, or
I
maybe in
would
his first
guess.
year though.
Yeah.
Like the I like the
Oh,
car in the background. Did your as long as you remember, did your parents have a car?
the first car I knew them to have was a 1936 Chevy. And I don't know when they started making cars again
Mhm.
for the general public, but it was the 36 Chevy that my dad had for years. I think he drove that at almost 10 years.
Oh.
And yeah, we called her Betsy.
Oh, the car, that
Yeah.
car.
See if
Ah.
Betsy was running that day.
And you mentioned in an email you sent me with some family information back in 2011 that I was looking over earlier today. That Bernice, you mentioned, was the first or among the first in the family to have a car. She had a car, I think her mom bought it for her in 1926 or something. And you mentioned that she went driving and it got in an accident, gave it to her brother, and never drove again.
That's exactly the story.
Sounds like her.
And the oldest sister, Marion, married very young, which was traditional then. And so whenever they had a car, it was with my uncle that by marriage. And then my mother was next in line. I don't know when they got the 36 Chevy's, the first car I knew about. And Bernice was next. And after my grandmother was a widow, she said, oh, that they needed a car to at that time of the 20th century. And so Bernice, ran off the road and hit the curb right and almost a street pole or something. And she got out and said, that's it for me. John can have the car.
And wasn't she waving at a boy?
Probably.
I think that's the story
She
I
was the
heard.
cutest little thing. She was adorable.
What did Mary Beth say? Something about a boy? I couldn't hear her.
I thought I remembered hearing she was waving at a boy she knew.
Oh.
That's cute.
Yeah, she really fun. That picture at the bottom in the center, well, that could be my Uncle John.
Yeah,
But
I think that's Bernice. I think that's Ray there, I think.
oh, maybe so. I don't know though. Bernice was so tiny. She swears she was more than 5 feet tall, but I don't ever remember her being even 5 feet 1 or 2, but I don't know. Doesn't look like her. I don't
And this
know.
picture over here from 1926, this would have been when your older brother Ray, they called him Jackie?
Yes, he's John Raymond and they called him Jackie.
John Raymond. And then this is Lillian's mom. Yeah, Frances
Yes,
Kinney Taylor.
Annie, my Nana. Yes, she was Mary Frances Taylor. Mary Frances Kenny Taylor. Her parents were Irish.
And on some sort of pictures of when my dad was a little boy. Well, this one here would have been I don't know who that would be in the baby stroller there, but
Probably, well, yeah, either David, who we call
no,
Ron.
actually, no, this would have been Ray, and then this would have been my dad. That's what it is. It looks so much like my dad. I was thinking that was my dad here on the left side. But that would be
You don't
Ray.
think so?
That's
You,
great.
you think that's your uncle?
I believe so, because there are other pictures like this one here. I think it was from the same. Then that's definitely my dad here.
Okay.
So I think that same, bassinet or stroller or whatever that is over here. I'm presuming that's his older brother here.
Ah, okay.
Oh, and
And that
actually,
was,
it is written up here that uh, Ronald, yeah, okay, 8, 6, 8, and 15 months. Okay, so
okay,
and
and that was my grandmother's house that my grandfather had built. And my grandmother and the 3 daughters and the 1 son lived in that house. And after the oldest daughter, Marion, married, my grandmother had it made into a 2-flat with an entryway behind that door you're looking at. And my grandmother and her husband and their 4 boys were raised there. They had a bedroom built on the back of the 2nd floor, and they called it the boys' room because they had 4 sons and they all slept in that room. But the 1st floor, where they added to it, they had 2 bedrooms on the back because there was no 1st floor bedroom when the house was built. And they had to put a bathroom down there. And the bedrooms upstairs were made into a living room, a dining room, and my aunt and uncle's bedroom. And they lived there, oh my gosh, until 1953. No, 1949, when I graduated from high school. That was still their house. And your brother and his family on that trip, Rosemary, you remember long ago, that's that same house that we were across the street from in a 2-flat. It looked the same porch, and I think the same lace curtains in the living room window.
some other pictures from that time period here. I'm presuming that's you there here on the right.
Is, well, look at that. Is that adorable? And it's
So
me.
cute. I love it.
Oh, and my brother with his blonde hair and dimples. Oh, he was the cutest thing.
You and we'll see a lot of pictures of you and my dad, you and your older brother here throughout the next several slides or so. But I mean, I remember him telling me that you guys were 2 really, really good buddies growing
Oh,
up.
we were 15 months apart. And when we were both young, we shared a bedroom. And look at us. My mother dressed us often like twins because we were so close in age. And look at the height of Ray.
Yeah.
70 was older than your dad, 8.5 or 9 years older than I. And he's sprouting. And the knickers. Did you
Yeah.
notice the knickers he's wearing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cute.
Oh my golly. Oh, look at that. Oh, that's Dorothy Jean Davidson.
So
Yeah.
that's Davidson. That's a last name. That's who Gertie married and became a Davidson, right?
Yes, you're right. She married, yeah. Oh my gosh. And Jackie Nolan, that was the oldest of my mother's nephews. Oh golly. And
So
on the
remind me the
right,
connection to Jackie Nolan, because he shows up again in a picture in a bit.
whoever that man is holding the baby on the right, that could be my brother. I don't know. In the
Is Jackie Nolan Marion's son?
Jackie Nolan was the oldest of those boys. Yes, they were Jack,
Was the older-
Roy, Rob, and Ralph.
Yeah.
So that's
And
my grandma Lillian's sister's son.
Yes, right.
Ralph.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So here are some pictures of you guys having fun together, shoveling snow, and it's some sort of I don't know, carnival or something off to California. I think so funny because obviously you ended up
funny.
living in California for.
Isn't that
Uh,
funny that that would come up? And that picture was taking, I think it was at Fields, Marshall Fields. They had set up different things, and my mother said, "Oh, we have to have a picture of you there." And so we sat up there on the train, thinking that California would be the last place in the world I would ever.
Yeah. Ah.
And this is a great picture here with Uncle Ray, which looks like, I don't know when for what period of time. Well, you could share what period of time was he in the service during World War II? Because if he was born in 19, what do we say, 26?
Yes. And he,
So during the war, he would have been prime age to be, to be in the war. Was he overseas or at home, or what was he doing during the war that you remember?
yes, I do remember quite well. In fact, he was 17 when he graduated from St. Mel's High School. And the draft started with 18-year-olds. And my father said to him, "Ray, you do not want to wait till your 18th birthday living here single." And he said, "You'll get drafted in the Army. You want to
Enlist?
volunteer now, yeah, in either the Air Force or, well, in those days, the Navy and Marines were the same thing." And I remember the very day that my parents signed the paper for him, but at
Wow.
17 years old to go into the Air Force. And
Oh.
I was in my bed and they were standing at my dresser at the end of the room and the papers were there. And I heard my mother say, "Jack, please don't ask me to sign that paper." And he said, "Lil, it'll be good for him." So of course, my mother signed away. And Dave and I and my parents took Ray down to the IC, the Illinois Central Station, for him to get inducted into the Army. And my mother was so brave, she never shed a tear, but inside her heart was breaking because my Bernice's husband was killed in the war, and Marion's three of her sons were drafted before my brother went in, and my mother was just a wreck, of course. But
So
we went,
Bernice's husband, Joe Mattis, right, was his name?
yes,
And he was shot down in Europe or in Asia. Do you know?
actually not shot down. We were quite sure as time went on, they released information that he was in a troop truck with a long line of troop trucks in France on his way to the Battle of the Bulge, which I looked up one time, and it was called that because the shape of Germany at the northwest, it was like a big bubble, big bulge that went out to the left. And it was a huge, one of the last major battles of World War II. And his troop truck hit a bomb crater, which must have been huge in those days. I can't imagine the size of it. And it tipped over, and he and another man were fatally injured, taken to a hospital in France, and he died there. My uncle died there. And 2 years later, his body was brought back to the US, and we were all at the funeral. I mean, I was 2 years older then. I knew what was going on. And he could have been buried overseas, but my aunt wanted him back in the United States. So that's where he's buried to this day. So everyone was terrified of the war. I mean, our lives were so different. I could go on forever about that. Standing in line to get chicken on a certain day of the week. My mother would send Ronnie and me because long lines waiting. Another day to go up to the bakery and get bread. And this just went on all the time. It was part of our lives.
And I remember my dad telling me that he would, like a lot of kids back then, would go around collecting up tin cans and things for recycling. Was that something you did as well, or is that more like something the boys would do? Or
It was something the boys would do. And another thing my brother did was volunteer at the local Austin Town Hall. And a certain day of the week after school, they'd go and roll bandages. And only the boys were allowed to do that. It just, there was a different world in those days. We
you
stayed
say
home with our
roll
moms.
bandages?
roll bandages. That's what he called it. So apparently I can picture yards and hundreds of yards of gauze, I guess.
Hmm.
And they rolled them into a certain length, and they'd all be shipped overseas.
Wow,
What
wow.
was Ray when he was in the war? Was he overseas in like a combat type of thing, or was he in a support role, or what? Do you know what your brother was doing?
Yes, I never finished that. Nothing like that. So he went over at the age of 17. He sent my mother a picture of him and a bunch of other young guys who looked just like him, making a pyramid up and acting up and all that, to say that everything was fine there. And the war was over that suddenly. And was that in June of 1946, 5 or 6, I guess?
May of 45 is when the Germans surrendered, and then the Japanese wasn't until later in the summer.
Yeah. And so my brother and all the young men his ages, 17 and 18, were just starting their training. So they sent them all home. I think he was actually only in service for, I'm going to say 7 months, something like that. And one morning I woke up in our apartment on West End Avenue, and your dad said to me, Lois, I think that Ray is discharged from the army. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, look, he's asleep in the den, and his jacket has a discharge button in the lapel, and it was hanging over a chair. And of course, Ray was sound asleep in the den. And I said, how do you know? Well, Dave knew everything like that. If anything was to be known, ask David. He was, I think, a lot like you.
Oh, what a great story. I never heard that.
Yes, and he's the one. So of course we were real quiet around the house till he woke up. And boy, did we have a celebration after that. Yeah.
But one a story that my dad shared with me about his older brother, and I don't know, I think this was maybe during a period of time when he was training, or for some reason he was in Florida, as I recall, and maybe at some point. But that in Chicago, of course, there was not like legalized segregation like there was in parts of the South, but he was in some part of the South. Ray was, again, I think it was Florida is what I recall, but he was walking down the street and a black man stepped off the curb into what I remember being described as kind of a muddy gutter. And and your brother asked, like, why did you do that? And he said, don't you make trouble for me, sir. And so I was just, that was something that my dad shared with me that I'd share with my students, just as, this is a guy from Chicago where there was, it was segregated, by, like you mentioned, like a Dutch area, or maybe where more Catholics lived, or maybe there's an area where, more, black people lived, in an area where more white people did, but it wasn't a legalized, enforced,
That's correct.
law that they
Yeah.
had like it was in some parts of the South, where some of these guys from the North would go, and then they'd be, kind of like my dad would share with me when he went to graduate school at St. Louis University in 1955, which is just over the Mississippi River from Illinois, but it was in the South at that point, and where there was, the segregation that he just was not as aware of, or he had not experienced, because he hadn't been outside the Chicago area much, at least, the Illinois. But he was saying that when he got off the train, I think it was, or a bus or something, and he wanted to get a cab, that there were signs for colored cabs. And he told me that he remembers thinking, well, I don't care what color the cab is, I just need a cab. That was just something he had, even though he lived relatively, close as the
Yes.
but that distance was still such that a young white boy, man growing up in Chicago wouldn't have experienced those signs and that overt, racism, that overt segregation.
Oh my God. Well, and the war service had a lot to do with the integration, because they served together in some areas as time went on. But yeah, it changed a lot of opinions. Oh, that's our Easter outfits and Easter baskets. Yeah. always had new outfits and
Absolutely.
yeah, my brother in his cap. Oh, and I have a bunny, I see. Oh, and so does Ronnie.
Oh, yeah, yeah, he's got a bunny there too.
Whatever.
And on the right is a first communion. And they would choose one boy and one girl. They would have been second graders who are going to lead the group of their fellow students. And my brother, not surprisingly, was chosen to lead the boys of his second grade. And who that girl is, I don't know, but she would have been chosen to lead the girls. And my my and Ronnie said to my mother one time, because he heard so many comments in the neighborhood, Mom, do I have to be a priest? And she said, No, you don't. He said, Well, I keep hearing all your friends saying that they think I'm going to be a priest. And she said, No, you don't have to be. You can be whatever you want to be.
So Lois, the pictures across the street there, that's kind of like what the house looked like on West End Avenue, huh?
Well, I think that's in front. Oh, that building, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes,
That's
yes,
how they
I know.
look.
It would have been the one over Ronnie's head with
Uh-huh.
the 3 or 4 windows on the second floor. Those were 4 bedrooms when the house was originally built. And then my grandmother would sit in the window downstairs in those lace curtains and watch us go to school in the morning. We'd all come home for lunch, then we'd all go back after lunch. And it was only a block and a half. And then we'd walk home after school. And I think that kept her busy most of her days. Heck, Rosemary, that could be me now and you in another 10 years.
Watching.
Old people's home watching children walk to and from school.
And this picture looks to be from about the same perspective, you know, from with these trees here with the houses in the background, who knows, but it looks like a line of neighborhood kids out. Cause then there's some other pictures in here, Lois, with neighborhood kids at birthdays and stuff. What was it? You know, I was fortunate to grow up in San Jose in a neighborhood with a lot of kids my age. We're always outside, you know, playing sports or playing hide and seek and, you know, whatever mischief we'd get into. Was it a similar neighborhood where you live?
Yes, very much
kids?
so. Yeah, and I think that's my brother, the third from the right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I believe that's Ronnie.
Yeah.
And on the very left, it could be one of my cousins, one of the Nolans.
Uh-huh.
But yes, we all oh, my group played softball out in the street, and West End Avenue was only a half a dozen blocks long, so there weren't many cars driving on there. So that was baseball playing. Oh, and then we'd play Red Rover, let so-and-so come over. Did you ever play that game?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Red light, green light. And it would be West End Avenue that we were running across from one tree on one side to a tree on the other side. And we played a lot on our back porch because we had a long, wide as a house back porch. And my mother, on a day when she wanted to do her biggest cleaning, she'd set everything up for us to play on the back porch. And then she cleaned everything immaculately. And I remember her even putting my toy stove and my toy sink and my dolls. And then my brother Ronnie, he and his friends were playing war. And so they'd come and go. They'd come and say that they were having lunch or having their, what do they call their food in the war? I don't even know anymore.
Rations or something?
Yes, their rations. And we had white cookies and graham crackers and water. And we'd make all kinds of make-believe food out of those 3 items. So,
Good life.
are you taking me back? And on the left, of course, that's my brother Ray and my brother Ronnie. I don't know if that's our backyard or maybe my grandmother's. Could be. Oh, who's the horse rider? I'm guessing that's my brother Ray, but I don't know.
Oh, okay. So I wasn't sure when these aren't necessarily all in order here, but yeah, here's another one. I don't know if you recognize it. That's of course my dad. That looks like that could be Ray.
Ray. And that could be my cousin Dorothy Jean. I'm not sure. We didn't see my dad's family as often, so I wouldn't know them so much when they were younger because I was so much younger.
There's a picture I really like of the three of you. Looks like,
Oh,
going
yes.
swimming. I don't know where you would have gone swimming in downtown, Chicago
Oh,
neighborhood back
Well,
then.
we'd go to Delavan, to Lake Delavan,
Oh,
and
okay.
that property is still there. Joe and I, my husband and I, would go away for a weekend when our children were little. My parents would babysit, and we'd go up there to those same little cottages. Isn't that something? Let's see, there was a hot stove, an electric 2 burner kind of stove, like a camping stove.
Huh.
That was the kitchen, and there was running cold water, but no hot water. There were cottages were all made out of wood or whatever kind of finish that is, and we'd go shower at a shower room, one for the male and one for the female, and walk down to the beach. And oh my gosh, we had many wonderful summers there. And here Ray is still with us, so he's young there too.
And what's the body of water that you said that you were on?
It was Lake Delavan, and it's a rather short drive from the west side of Chicago. Lake Geneva is the bigger lake, but these cottages were on Delavan.
In Wisconsin.
In Wisconsin, thank you.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh, and there's our back porch on West End Avenue. My dad had that swing made at his foundry and machine shop. And look at Ray in the hat and Ryan in the short pants. Yeah. Oh my God, must have been our Sunday best.
You are in your Sunday best.
Tell me a bit, Lois, about what your dad, is a foreman at you said it was like a factory, a foundry, which,
Yes.
so can you tell me about what he did for his
Well-
job? Was he there for like most of his career, or?
Yes, for a great deal of his career. And he never worked in the foundry part. He was always a shirt and tie man. And he was, when I knew him, the shipping foreman. He started out as a salesman. It was a Jones Foundry and Machine Company. And it was founded by a Mr. Jones, and 2 or 3 sons of his ran the business after he got older or passed away. And both of those sons had polio. That was another thing we went through in those years. Yeah. And nobody knew where it came from. Our beaches were closed for at least one whole summer down at Lake Michigan. Because polio was just rampant. It was so fortunate that none of us was affected. But my sister-in-law was, my son, or my husband Joe's sister Mary, was the only one out of those 7 children who got polio. It was this mysterious illness, and it crippled our lifelong friend Marv Lapicola, who went from senior year in high school until a few months ago when he passed away with no use of his legs. I mean, this was that popular.
I remember that. I've heard that last name before. Hang on just a second. I heard my son walk through. Hey, Will.
Oh,
Will.
am I talking too much, Rosemary?
Oh, I love this.
Oh, I asked the right person. Okay, Mary Beth's sitting here
Yeah.
next to me. I'm looking at her too. Am I
So
okay?
interesting. Everything.
Hey, it's me.
Hi, Will.
Will.
Oh,
So-
hi, Will. I see many pictures of you, Will.
So this is my dad's younger sister Lois, and she's
Hi.
in Chicago area right now. We're meeting to talk about our family history.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yep.
and I don't know if people tell you this, but sorry, Rosemary, but he resembles my brother, and
Absolutely.
he resembles you, of course, Andrew. I'm sure you heard that many times.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it was where was it, Mary Beth?
Allie's wedding.
Oh, at Allie's wedding.
Yeah. So yeah, Will was able to make that trip with
Yeah,
us.
it was just 2 or 3 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He
it was down
he's
there.
gotten a lot taller.
And back there with my lazy dog.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Anyway, I'll bring back up the pictures here, and then I know my girlfriend Monica's working here from home, but she'll be when she walks by, I'll share the,
Oh, I
so
hope
I can
so.
introduce you to her.
I hope so.
Yeah, so this is actually where I am right now. This is my home office that I'm working from here, facing out the front window. But so it's kind of nice being, you're a teacher for so many years. You can imagine being able to be a teacher, but be able to do it from your home has certain advantages.
Yes, it does. I had one student like that who through an illness was hooked up to my high school Spanish class by remote phone or whatever it was, but that was the only experience I had with it. Of course,
Yeah.
Mary Beth had much more than that. Still has a lot of that. Oh, look at this. Is another one of those cottages up at Lake Lawn, Lake
Do you
Delavan.
know who that might be?
And I don't know who that boy is on the end, probably a friend that we'd made with those from the cottage next door or something, And look at my two brothers sitting so close together. Aren't they cute?
And in the
And
picture on the left, you would, I believe this is your handwriting here. Well, it must be because you said our handsome father, and you mentioned a place called Kittyland. I was curious what Kittyland was.
yes, well, it was like, let's see, what's the
Like
children's
Six
playground
Flags,
today?
kind of
Like Six Flags, but much smaller.
Yeah.
And by the name Kittyland, it was for children more my age and a little bit older. And they had the merry-go-round, that was just a little locked indoors, two children and it only went up maybe one story or something around and around. And my parents would take us to Kittyland. And I'm sure they had, oh, you know what? They would have had horses, ponies for us to ride. And what did I write? Our handsome father. Oh,
And
in
then it says
Kittyland.
Kittyland question
I
marks.
thought
Like
of that.
you're
Oh, that was so much fun. It was out at Fifth Avenue in Maywood. And my father's sister, Gertie and Chester, and raised their family. They had a house right nearby. And we'd often visit them, maybe twice in a summer over vacation time, go out there and gosh, and do all the rides in Kittyland. Yeah.
this is my dad's 8th birthday party, so this is probably a lot of the neighborhood kids, which were also probably probably I don't know, neighborhood kids, school friends, and church friends. They probably overlapped quite a bit, I would imagine. But
No kidding. Look at those. Oh my gosh. Can you imagine
That's-
what classrooms like? We had 30, 40 children in a class at the Catholic school. I don't know what the public schools were like. Oh, they are playing a game, eating ice cream. And you see,
so?
oh yes, I'm in the middle and my brother Ronnie behind me. And do I recognize Roger or, oh, the little girl, the second from the left was our next door neighbor.
So
Oh,
cute.
Jean Marie O'Neill. That's who it was.
is
Oh,
this in your yard, in your backyard, or where this
yeah, I'm sure it is. Yes, the woman who owned our place gardened all around and beautiful flowers and everything. Well, and this obviously is up in the country. Look at your dad with the umbrella. What did we call them?
parasol?
Parasols.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Trying to take good care of his skin. That's good.
Yeah. Or the sun. We learned that from our neighbors to the south. I mean, way south, like Mexico and South America. Oh, and they're the ice skates. Yes, shoe skates.
Wow, they're awesome.
And Dave with his earmuffs. Oh, and that's my Uncle John and Aunt Mary. John was my mother's younger brother. And he was in service in Puerto Rico. They drafted men without children to the age of 40. So John was 40 or close to it, and he and Mary never had children. They adopted a son later, but they had no children of their own. So here he was home on leave, and of course we all would have got together and gone out to.
He's a good guy.
Oh, he was
She was
wonderful.
sweet too.
Yeah, and his Aunt Mary, his wife Mary was from North Dakota, but she came down here to go to nursing school. And
Yeah.
somewhere along the line, that's where they met. And were, of course, part of our whole family.
Oh, yeah, good people.
I
Oh,
see
yeah.
here May of 45. with
Oh,
Dorothy, who was Ray's girlfriend before Mary, it says here.
really? With
Yeah,
Dorothy?
here on the right. So I wonder if this is, if
Ah,
Ray was back by that point, May of 45. So that's after the war in Europe was officially over in early May. So I wonder,
Yeah,
maybe he took the picture. Who knows?
probably a good guess. Sure enough.
Couple
Oh.
other picture of my pious and studious dad here.
Yeah, yeah, who was supposed to be a priest according to the neighborhood ladies, right?
And then there's we mentioned Jackie Nolan earlier, who was killed
Oh,
in France. And
yeah.
no,
Home on,
actually, no, I'm sorry, that was Joe Mattis. So Jackie Nolan has here home on furlough in January of 44, retired after service with shrapnel in one arm and leg, and that he died by drowning in Wisconsin.
yeah, rented boat. The thing to do there was to get a ride on a speedboat. And so those speedboats were, the owner, the driver, would put 6 or 8 of us on a boat and go tearing around the lake like maniacs. And it was even more
Wow.
exciting at night. And his boat and another boat, the one he was on, crashed. And he wasn't found for 3 days later.
Ah,
Remember my aunt and uncle, oh, it was unmerciful.
yeah.
Mm. Now, let's see,
So just
definitely big one.
a lake, and that's a Delawan.
Delavan. Delavan.
Delavan. Okay, that's a V. Yeah. So there he
And
is there.
next to my dad on the right, I think, is Ray, and that's one of his cousins, one of the Nolan boys on the left. Let's
Oh,
see,
okay.
probably Jack, Roy. Yeah, I think Rob was the one who looked. That's probably Rob Nolan, who was closest in age to Ray.
This
Oh
one,
my!
Ronald caught these 2 fish the first time he went fishing, which he enjoyed deep sea fishing. When I was younger, he'd go away. Well, how often? Once every year or so, Mom?
Once every year, for a couple of days.
I forgot all about
But
that.
this is it's called what? Strong's Resort in Paw Paw Lake, Michigan.
Fall Lake, yeah, yeah. We rented a bedroom on the second floor of their house. And look at him catching fish already, yeah.
And
Oh,
here,
my
this is with
God.
Mother's Day with our Nana, Mary Frances Kinney Taylor.
Yeah.
I've never seen that picture.
Oh, gosh, I'm sure I don't have it, or I would
Look
have
at
said,
her hat. Oh,
yes, and that's her front porch. And it was screened in all the way around, that she would sit in
wow.
the living room window or in the warmer weather out on that porch and watch us all go back and forth to school.
And she lived pretty close by, right? So was she around quite a bit for birthdays and
Always directly across the street from us. We
Oh,
lived
okay.
in the apartment we did, thanks to my mother wanting to be that close to her mother. And my oldest aunt, Marion, they made it into a 2-flat, and she and her husband and 4 boys lived on the second floor. But initially it was I think they were the first house built on that street. And the reason they picked that spot was my grandfather worked downtown, and that's as far as the streetcar went into Chicago. And the streetcar was just 2 blocks away. And he'd take this streetcar down into the business section of Chicago.
And didn't Bernice live with her after her husband was killed in the
Yes,
war?
he went back and lived in that apartment on the first floor with
Bernice
her
did,
my
yeah.
grandmother.
Who was the first one to have electricity? Was it that house?
I think they always had electricity, and they were about the first ones to have a telephone. And the story is that my grandmother, who was so excited about getting a phone, she would sit next to this wireless thing almost all day and listen for the beep at certain hours. It was like a telegraph office would do that or something. The communication, there was no talking to anybody, just this beeping sound to show that the phone was being set up. And this is
my girlfriend Monica.
Hi, Monica.
Oh,
Hi,
Monica.
how are you?
Well, fine and delightful meeting you, honey.
Oh, nice to meet you too.
I'm glad you planned that our time would overlap. This is
Yeah, I had a quick meeting I had to attend, but it's over now.
well, you might have been bored by some of what we've gone through here, but I don't know.
Oh, it's okay. It's good that you guys are going back and finding all of the information. I think it's
wonderful.
great.
Probably going to make you want to do the same thing someday with your family.
Yeah,
with your
probably. I think my cousins have started.
Oh,
we'll see.
good.
Yeah,
Good for them. Somebody has to take the lead, which
right.
Andrew has done.
When I
Yeah.
first met Monica's parents, her dad and I took a long walk together, and I got to hear a lot about his family history. He was from Guadalajara, Mexico. She used to be a Spanish teacher, my Aunt Lois.
Okay.
Ella
Oh,
habla
my
español y ella habla
Oh, yo
español,
hablo,
por
es,
supuesto.
yes, poquito español for me.
But it was really interesting to hear about her dad's background. I got to hear quite a bit about that, and then
Oh,
you know,
that must be
a bit about
fascinating.
mom's.
Yeah.
Oh.
Mary Beth, show your face so Monica can see you.
Oh,
Oh, yes,
there
Mary
she
Beth.
Hi.
Share this with
Hi,
me.
nice to meet you.
Little
meet you,
niece.
Monica. Nice to meet you.
Stay here. I'm not used to all these electronic things all you younger generations are, so I didn't realize that Mary Beth could be right
Oh,
on here
that's okay.
too.
Andrew's the master. I'm impressed.
Oh, yeah, he digs deep and finds all kinds of info.
For certain. Oh my
Yeah.
golly, this is lovely.
Well, I'll let you guys get back at it. Nice to meet you. Nice
Well,
to see
thank you,
Rosemary.
Monica. I hope we'll meet in person someday, if ever,
Yeah,
ever.
hopefully.
Well, you kind of better hurry up. I'm gonna be 90 this year, so
Well, you look great.
you don't have a lot of time for you to visit.
She's doing great.
You can come and
Good.
see Mary Beth. And
Oh, you'll be around for a long
All right.
okay, kiddo.
I'm glad you guys got to meet over the computer there, and
Oh,
I'd love to take her to Chicago.
Oh, wouldn't
You
that
know, one of
be
these
wonderful?
years soon, to get to meet a lot of the family out there, and including of course you guys. So
Oh,
Fun
we will.
family.
Pardon me?
That fun family.
Oh, yeah. Bigger, bigger, bigger. Oh,
a
look-
couple pictures of my dad with his parents here. Right,
oh, isn't that lovely?
number
Oh,
of
my-
pictures
oh, my
here
gosh.
with a lot of them here with. Well, of him with you and with
Oh,
you know,
the
Ray.
pants and the babushka.
Look at the outfit.
I
They're
want
styling.
that was very much the style, Rosemary. Aren't you glad you missed that, Rosemary?
Yeah.
Mary Beth, come around, honey, please.
And then look at grandma in her mink coat.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that
Oh,
beautiful?
it was the
Oh,
coat
Nelly.
was a curly lamb, and the collar was and the cuffs were mink,
Mm.
and
Oh, wow.
the hat too. Oh yes. Oh, I just gave my mink coat to guess who wants it in my family? Not Mary Beth. Taylor.
No. Taylor.
She came over the other day and she said, well, show me your fur coat. It's been hanging out in the closet for 8 years. I wouldn't wear it anywhere now, you know, but I wouldn't get rid of it either. She said, I said, you want this? Yes. What are you going to do with it? I'm going to wear it. I said,
Oh, how
go
fun.
for it, girl. She put it
Oh, that's great. That's good. I remember when you got that.
perfectly. Yeah.
I love it.
Oh, my mother in her fox furs with the tails, the fox tail on it.
Wow.
She had the whole thing except the head. I think that was the clasp or something.
Mother's Day 1950. So my dad's what, 16 going on 17.
Oh
And
my gosh.
there's-
Let's see. Yeah. Well, I'm 15. So he would, yes, 16, 17 in that.
were you generally one of the, you seem so tall here. Were you generally one of the taller people like in your
I wasn't.
classes?
I hated it. There was one girl taller than me. That was Mary Jane Altman. And she was probably a half an inch difference. So we were always at the back of the line. One time I said to my mother, Mom, do you think I'll ever be as tall as Ray? because he was fully grown at 6'3", you know, when he was probably 16 or something. And she said, "Oh, Lois, I don't think you'll ever be that tall." But I was afraid I would be. Would you? Oh. So yes, at the tallest of, and all my friends were 5'2", 5 feet.
100 pounds or less.
Yes, exactly, soaking wet. That's funny. But see, my mother was tall for her era too. She was 5'5" or 6, I think. Something like that.
Yeah.
And I was five
Were
feet
were you
seven.
ever back in those times, Lois? Was there? I'm just wondering if, like a lot of times now, high school kids, middle school, high school kids that are tall, they kind of like get recruited to be on the basketball team or the volleyball team or something. Were there sports for girls when you were in high school? And if there were you ever kind of like recruited to come play basketball or something because you?
Well, well, we played basketball, not grammar school, but in high school. But girls' rules, you were not allowed to cross the center line. So you were either a guard or you were a forward, and you were on opposite sides of the line. So my team, if I was a guard, the forwards from the other team were on our side, and and vice versa. And you had to come to a screeching halt when you got to the center of the floor and pass the ball to a teammate on the other side.
Oh,
And I
wow,
guess
I never heard
they
of that.
thought we couldn't run that far, that fast, or that something or other. I don't know what. And
Wow.
but the thing that was so good about it in high school, at least with the nuns, we never took showers. So that we had a whole shower room completely outfitted but bare inside, and we never once used them in 4 years. But when the Northwest, whatever it was, association had to check our school to be sure that we would be accepted as a real school, our all-girl Catholic school, all of a sudden there'd be um, shower curtains on the rods, never saw them before, and a bar of soap in the soap dish, which I never saw before. So we go right from the basketball court. And we only played that, and we did play volleyball.
Badminton?
No, we had one gym. Well, now, of course, the school has a big gym, a separate room and all that business. But no, nothing. We just quickly changed. I don't think we even changed. We didn't have gym shoes. We
No.
wore our regular loafers or saddle shoes or whatever and put on this one-piece gym suit. It was like a romper for grown-ups. And then after gym, we'd strip that off and get back in our uniforms, our green suits,
Oh.
go for the rest of the day. Ugh, doesn't that sound gross?
So,
I didn't catch, Lois, why the nuns not want you girls to shower?
Well, please, naked bodies?
Oh, okay. Even
That would never be. They didn't even eat with us. They ate in separate rooms. You know, oh no, I never, ever were we in anything less than our underwear.
then here, I don't know if in both pictures, it looks like this is a picture from the same day based on my dad's hair and shirt, but apparently this is your cousin Mary Ann when she was born.
That's the oldest one, my oldest niece, Mary Ann, now Creighton.
Thanks, daughter.
Mary Ann Creighton, yeah. Yeah, came to visit, and there we are in our backyard.
So at this point, did your older brother Ray and Mary, and then Mary Ann, were they living in Indiana at this point, or were they still nearby?
No, well, Ray and Mary's first apartment was just a block away from ours on Washington Boulevard. And my parents were walking by one time, and my mother said, "Oh, let's stop and say hello to Ray and Mary." And they rang the doorbell. Well, I don't know what kind of situation they invaded, but well, shortly after that, Ray and Mary moved to an apartment on the north side. They wanted their own territory.
You weren't just popping in.
Pardon me?
No one was just popping in on them.
No popping in those. No, not in this generation. My mother never repeated that story to anybody else. I would overhear some of those stories.
Oh, I love it.
Maybe we shouldn't have done that, but situation did. You lived in the same house or across the street from from your parents, yeah. Oh,
Well, just
look at,
just last night, as a matter of fact, they a friend of mine that lives in the general neighborhood, and I let him know that we moved here, and he's busy with kids and travel teams and stuff, but he stopped by, and so I'm just programmed now, and when the doorbell rings, I like hide. I'm thinking, okay, what's this person trying to sell me? Who's coming to my
oh.
door? You know, they're trying to sell me solar panels or cable TV or what. So, when the ring doorbell goes off, we're kind of like, getting in this kind of defensive posture, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's Nick. Somebody's stopping by just to say, hey, that's like that doesn't happen. At least that hasn't happened.
Maybe they're from the west side of Chicago. I didn't
Yeah.
Uh,
So getting
Oh,
the
my.
last few slides here, but I love this picture of you both with Aunt Bernice. Says here about 1955. So this is about the
Oh,
time then my dad would be going off to St. Louis to graduate school.
oh,
And then
let's see.
then you went
55.
to Marquette, right? Did you go right out of high
I
school
did, right out
to
of high
Wisconsin?
school. Yes, and I'm trying to think about your dad though, because, well, he only went to Fenwick through sophomore year. You know that, right? And then from there on, he went to junior, senior year, and 4 years at Fournier,
Yeah.
and 2 years at graduate school at St. Louis. All on scholarships,
yeah.
all those years, and
Yeah, I
full
have.
scholarships, uniform, food, clothing, shelter, everything, thanks to Mr. Schmidt.
Yeah, I have his yearbooks have been passed down to me. So
Oh,
when I moved recently, going through the yearbooks and looking
yeah.
in the index for Steenhausen and going to the different pages, the different
Nice.
activities he was involved with, and things of that nature. But yeah, so I did know. I remember growing when I heard that, when I was a kid, that my dad went to the same high school and college. Like, what? That seems
A
so odd,
private
but
school with 100 boys in the whole school, all learning to be electrical engineers. Yeah. And
Very
look at him in that picture with my parents. Oh my gosh, he's so young looking. Well, that's probably one of the Fournier buildings in the background. I don't know. In Lamont, Illinois.
And
My
I'm
father,
reminded, asking my dad at some point years ago, like, why did you want to be an electrical engineer? Why did you want to go into engineering? He said, that I got a scholarship. I got a scholarship for it. I didn't necessarily, I don't remember his exact words, but some of the effect, he had no passion for engineering necessarily, but it was, where you're, you always, of course, had a home and knew where your next meal was coming from, but I get the impression your family wasn't necessarily like wealthy or something where paying for college. I don't know, for you at Marquette, did you have some sort of scholarship? Or I mean, you went to a
no,
school in a different state.
actually, if Dave had gone to a school, he needed room, board, and scholarship. I never could have gone to Marquette because they could not have done that for two of us to go away to school. And Ray went somewhat, even this short time, he was on the GI Bill for a scholarship. I don't know how he belonged to a fraternity and everything. He probably worked too.
Yeah.
But oh my gosh, when I think of, Dave, though, when he was growing up, Andrew, he was always building. It started out with Lincoln logs, the pieces of wood. I don't even know if you know what those are today.
Sure. Uh-huh.
It went on to American bricks, and they come with different level books that he could follow directions and build these things. And the last of the American bricks he did actually had an engine. And he made a Ferris wheel, like a doll-sized Ferris wheel for me once that I was supposed to I couldn't run my full-size dolls, but any little things that like baby dolls on that Ferris wheel. So everyone thought of him right away, engineer. And he said to me years later, after putting you three boys through your growing up periods, that if he had had a choice then that he has at this middle age, he would have been a doctor.
Yes, absolutely. I was going to add that in.
And he
said,
probably
"I should have
told
been a
you,
doctor."
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
and he certainly could have done it in every way. Well, engineers in a way are a lot like doctors, only they're working on wood and steel and instead of people.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So,
I like-
so you went to Marquette all 4 years and lived obviously away from home because it's in a different state.
Yes, I couldn't wait to get out of town. I knew a Lois that wasn't grown up yet with my friends and my family. And being the youngest and everything, I thought, no, I just have to get off on my own. And I was able to.
yeah.
Because it was just you there for a few years, right? If my dad in the last couple of years of high school was out of town, then it
Exactly.
was just you during your like freshman, sophomore, junior.
Yes,
Kind
and
of,
I missed him so much. My dad and another young man's in the neighborhood who was got the scholarship to Fournier, they would take turns. One would pick the boys up on Friday after school, and one would take them back to school on Sunday late afternoon or evening. And and Dave and I would sit in the living room long after our parents were in bed and sound asleep, as far as I could tell. And in soft voices, we'd tell each other everything, what our
Aw.
troubles were, how our things were going, how school was, how we really were the best of friends. So, oh, Rosemary, when he moved away to St. Louis, and then, oh, did I miss him terribly.
That's a great story. I
and then
love
And
it.
prior to that, then your older brother Ray, after the war, then he started at University of Illinois, right?
Yes.
And that was
Mhm.
after the war was over. Then he went on. I don't the University of Illinois. How far is that from Chicago? It's an hour or so.
Well, no, I think 2 hours or more,
Mhm.
but certainly drivable. And he used to used to pack up his dirty laundry and ship it home. My mother do his laundry for him. My dad would pack it all up, take it back to the post office, and they'd ship it back.
Oh,
He had enough clothes to last him a week plus a couple of shipping days. Yeah. But I never really knew my Ray, just a fraction of how I knew, because we were so distant in age and he lived away so I don't know that he ever had an apartment with friends. I think he lived back at home and then was dating Mary, who we had met, and she moved to Chicago. And I don't know if that was their plan or it just happened to be. The next thing I knew, she was entering our family, so to speak.
And then how long did they live in Chicago before they moved to Warsaw?
Well, he moved to Warsaw when he was a salesman for Victor Chemical Company and was determined to have his own business. And so it's some way they were financially able. Oh, and one of his customers, he sold raw chemicals to Warsaw Chemical Company. And that business was owned by a man like my father's age, and the other half was owned by a young man about Ray's age. And the older man was ready to sell his half of the business. And Ray got to know them through selling them raw chemicals. And he was in a financial position to be able to buy the older man's half of the company. And that all I heard, of course, because I was a teenager at the time, not a child anymore. And let's see, did they have all three girls when they moved to Warsaw? So Joni and
Nancy.
Nancy, I think the first three girls, Mary Ann, Joan, and Nancy. I think they had their three daughters when they moved there. And then I'm thinking Jack and Susie and Ellen after, but I'm not positive about that. Because then I was kind of in a different world in college. You know how that is.
Mhm.
Away, your
Well,
life
and
is
Nancy
away.
was your flower girl, wasn't she?
She was,
Mhm.
yeah. That's right, when we were married.
So you
Oh my
mentioned how Ray met Mary, but I just wanted to go back to that for a minute. Did they meet at college, or what period of time did Ray and Mary meet?
Yeah, the only thing I really know is that my mother said a backstory that came up later. She said that Mary lived in a sorority house down the street from Ray's fraternity house, and she was dating one of Ray's fraternity brothers, and Ray would see her walking with his fraternity brother, would meet them and they'd go down the street together. And she said, he's the only young man in all the friends that Ray had that he never liked And I think it's because he was dating Mary. And
Oh.
Mary somehow got to know him and date her. And how she moved to Chicago, I don't know. Her family was from a farm, Fairbury, Illinois. So once she left college, she came to Chicago for a job.
And what about you and your husband, Joe? You met at college, right?
We met through our very good friends. One of his high school college friends were the Bagalski brothers. One played basketball for Marquette, and the other one played basketball for St. Norbert's. And Joe went to St. Norbert's College and played basketball with the older brother. And once they arranged a blind date for us, which was how we almost met all of our boyfriend girlfriends at the time. I don't know about you, Rosemary, in your era.
Yeah, maybe it was like that too.
You have to
That-
think back
That's
before
just
David.
that's how you met him.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, was that Ron's first car?
And I remember there's a caption on it on the back, not a caption, but you know, when the photographs were developed at this time, it printed like when the photograph was taken, and it says 1961. So I don't know,
Maybe
19.
Pontiac? I think his first car was a Pontiac. But I'm not sure about that, and I don't know where that motel would have been.
And that's your dad in the front seat and Bernice and your mom in the back, I think.
Oh, Rosemary, I bet you're right.
They'd come out to California and they were probably staying at some
Oh,
hotel and, David
ah,
was
they may
taking
have
them
been
out of California.
okay.
Because Mom, when did Dad move for the first time to California?
Mm.
Would have
When
been
they
like the
bought
late
their business.
50s or around, I want to say 59 or 1960 or something like that. So they
Oh, when
must have all come out to visit.
they sold their business, yes, the business they had in, was that Philadelphia, Rosemary, when Dave met you?
No, he was living in Hartford, Connecticut when he met me.
Okay,
I mean,
and
over
that's,
in Ireland. But yeah, he had lived in Philadelphia for a year, but I didn't know him then. That was way before I met him.
okay, okay.
And then Mom, we just heard a bit about Ray and Mary meeting and Lois and Joe. What about you want to share about how you met Dad? You were just at the location where you guys met.
Yeah, we were, my mother and I were on that trip to
Oh,
Europe.
yes.
And he had taken his mom and dad back to go to Groningen because his
Yeah.
dad had been there since he was 11 years old, since he left. So we met at the hotel, Krasnopolski, because he and his mom were going to take the same trip. My mother and I were going to be on through down into Italy, 3-week tour of Europe.
Yeah. Mhm.
Dad was just there for like 4 days in Holland, and then he went back to Chicago, and his mom went on the trip with him. So,
And weren't you saying, you've told me, Mom, that that would have been like summer of what, 1969? Is that when you
May of
met?
60.
So at that point, my dad was in like his mid 30s or something. And wasn't he always, even on vacation, wasn't he always wearing a suit, or at least like a shirt and tie?
Very, very dressed up. Yes, you're right. Yeah, coat and tie, the whole bit. Oh my
And a
God,
perfect gentleman, I'm sure.
perfect gentleman. Is right.
Just a news clipping that was included in some things that you sent to my mom a while back, but I thought this was cool. 50th wedding anniversary, and mentions, of course, the kids and the like where they had it, Nielsen's restaurant. Do you remember that restaurant?
I certainly do. Yes, it was a favorite.
And so with the sons and a daughter, 12 grandchildren, and one great grandchild. So who
Oh,
would that have been at that time? One great grandchild.
well, would that have been Marianne?
Marianne, yeah, that was quite a party. We all went from California. That was a big deal.
Wasn't that something? Oh my gosh, yes.
You went to that, Drew.
Which one's that, Mom?
You would have gone to this. Paul was like 8 or 9, and
Oh,
yeah, we all flew back to Chicago for this party.
oh, that's
Oh,
neat.
it was a huge gathering.
I wonder if
Oh,
there are pictures around somewhere from that trip out to.
Hey, Mark, hi, buddy. What did he say?
He'll come say hi. in
Oh,
a
Mark will
minute.
come over and say hi in a little while. Okay.
Oh, good.
Let's see. So there, my dad with his brother. Now let me think. I should recognize, but not Elmer, not Heinz. I think John and Pete. They were the younger brothers and they lived the longest. And my mother in between. Yeah. I think that's Pete on the left and my Uncle John next to my dad. Oh my gosh.
So all the brothers stayed pretty close to Chicago and Gertie too.
Yes, they did. All stayed close by and the brothers owned a house together on Arlington Avenue. I still remember visiting them there. They were, oh gosh, they were fun. One of them played the piano and the other played the accordion. And with them, it was all singing and playing. And my father was the serious one. And I always sort of felt bad about that because I thought, well, yeah, he's the one that had 3 children.
And served in the war.
And so, well, that's true.
Trench warfare.
Yeah, went back to Holland in World War One. Yeah. And he said to me one time, I only made one mistake in my life. And he never told what that mistake was. I'm thinking it was that they never bought a home.
It could have been.
Yeah, but
Yeah, they always rented.
and he said he never had bad dreams. And I remember Ron and I saying, what, you never do? And he said, no, they're always happy dreams and the life that he led. Oh, what a brave man. He was great.
Hey, but before I forget, because we just have a couple more slides here. Before I forget, I wanted to ask, especially with my son being so into bowling, I remember hearing that my grandpa Jacob was a bowler. Do you remember anything about that? Was he in like a weekly bowling league or something? I think
Yes.
your son John told me he remembers that he had a 300, a perfect score at least once.
Oh,
And
I
I'm just
hope
so intrigued by
so.
that. Like
Wonderful.
in his busy time, if it was like Thursday bowling night, dad goes
Yeah.
out bowling or something.
You're right. And many companies or corporations had a bowling league. And the white collar guys and the men in the factory, everybody in the business could be on the bowling team. So what would that be like now? I don't know. Not
So he
pickleball,
was-
not tennis.
So Grandpa was on his.
Oh, yeah,
company's
yeah,
bowling
it was
team.
on his bowling team.
And he also was on a baseball team too, right? There was a company like
Yeah.
because I remember somebody, probably John or Joe, one of your sons telling me that he was a really good baseball player
Yeah,
as
he was
well.
excellent. And he batted left-handed, which our son John does still.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and yeah, do you throw right-handed?
I do. So my mom, you're primarily left-handed for everything, right?
Yeah.
And then my dad, I was on his side, some left-handed, like with left-handed batting and stuff like that. But yeah, it's weird. Batting left-handed, golfing, and then for some reason throwing darts. If I ever throw darts, I'm much more accurate left-handed than I am right-handed. But really, everything else right-handed.
Yeah.
But
All in the genes, I would guess, from both sides of the family.
so then
Yeah.
down here in this picture, I recognize Bernice and Grandma here. Who are the other folks here in this bottom right
Well,
picture?
next to Bernice is the oldest of the 3 sisters, Marion. She had the 4 sons and lived across the street from us on the 2nd floor of my grandmother's house.
It was sweet.
And Bernice, who did not have children. Bernice was Bernice Taylor. All the time she was single and married. And when my uncle was in the war and then killed, she had to admit to them that she was married because married women were never hired in those days.
And she worked for Prudential.
Yeah, which is still in business today, and was secretary to 2 different vice presidents. Yeah, and she didn't know if the company would keep her on when they found out that all those years she actually was married. But they were good about it and transferred, well, maybe because it was after the war and things were starting to change and they let her stay on and she had a wonderful career with them. And then next to my Uncle John, my mother's the youngest of the three. Well, there are the four siblings, right? And his wife, Mary, from North Dakota, the nurse, Rosemary.
Okay.
You remember her?
Yeah, I remember it from the earlier picture. And then your mom, Lois, she worked at Marshall Fields, right, for some period of
Well,
time. Was that
no.
after you guys were older, then she went and worked, or at what point did she get a job?
I'm embarrassed to tell you, she never worked until I went away to Marquette. And the price then, that was so much money for them. A semester of tuition at a private university, $225. And the next semester it went up to $250. And it was that way for 4 years. And room and board was $325 a semester. That was a lot of
Remember-
money. Pardon me?
You still remember all this. I love it.
Yeah. And my mother, oh, I felt terrible. My mother went and interviewed for that job, never even told my dad she was going to do it. And when they asked her what she could do and all that, she said, well, I can type and I can this and that. And they could tell she was well educated for her ear and all that, and liked her appearance. But she said, I can't be a salesperson and be on my feet all day. So they put her in the phone room. And when she called and told me she was working, well, I didn't transfer from Marquette. I kept on, and she worked all that time for me,
Great for her.
besides whatever I could make at school or over the summer. Yeah, so I
Oh, it
really,
was a great experience for her, though.
it turned out to be, my dad said it was the best thing she did after we were growing up. She loved, and her 20% discount. Oh my gosh, we got all our presents from Marshall Fields.
Remember, she said she got paid in green bags?
Oh, yes.
Because Marshall Fields had green bags. And
Mhm.
so joking that
Yeah.
she did a lot of shopping after you were
She
out of
spent all,
college.
yeah, she continued spending all her money down there with her 20%
She
discount.
did such a wonderful job at her job that they would give her a red rose when they would get a compliment about Mrs. Steenhausen.
You're right. Thank
Rose.
you for that. Yes. Yes, they'd listen in every so often on different people to see how they were answering the customers. Because the big Fields ad came out Sunday in the main, what, rotogravure, they used to call it, section of the newspaper. The fun and social things you'd read, and the ads for Fields. So Monday morning, especially Tuesday, people were calling in for a dress in that size or a pair of shoes or something, and that's what she did. And did very well. Yes, and I think, oh, she was so happy with it. It was marvelous. Mhm.
And then she continued doing that even after you were, out of college and married and
Oh,
just,
yeah. Long after my dad retired, she was working, and yeah, she loved it. Can you imagine that?
Taking
Uh,
all downtown. And
yeah, taking the L or the bus or whatever she did every day. She was something. Yeah, 5 days a week anyway. Yeah, she was an amazing
and I'm
woman.
still keeping up with all the cooking and washing and cleaning and the ironing and all these other
Oh,
things.
the laundry. Oh, yes.
Didn't she have a
Goodness.
schedule? Monday was.
oh,
She had Tuesday washing, Wednesday ironing, and she did that all day. It took all day to do all the laundry when 6 of us were home, and everybody ironing, and the men in business shirts every day. She ironed their shirts. She didn't send them out.
she irons your doll's clothes.
Yes, and she had a little ironing board doll size for me set up, and a plug-in iron, tiny iron, like what are they today? Travel irons are today, but it would only get barely warm. So, I was safe for children to use. And I'd iron the handkerchiefs next to her, because all the men in the family would have a clean handkerchief to start every day. No Kleenex then.
And Mom, I remember you telling me that, kind of like your husband Brian does now when he's, especially with guests over, he oftentimes doesn't sit for a long time. If people sit down, they're eating the food, but then he sees somebody's low on, green beans, or somebody could use more of this or that. And he
Wow.
hops back up and gets it. That Lillian wouldn't eat until like the very, very end of the meal. It was finally she could sit down and eat.
She'd be
Yeah.
running around.
You're
Yeah.
right. My dad never, oh, look at Ray's first 4 children. Marianne, Joan, Nancy, and then Jack, who I never hear from anymore since he married a woman with 2 children. And gosh, Rosemary, how old would they be now?
Those kids are probably in their early 30s now. I mean, at Joan's funeral, they were going to college. So they wouldn't be in their 30s. When at Joan's funeral, when I talked to his wife, was very sweet and
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. I don't know that I've ever heard that.
yeah. And then they were going to college the next year. So how long has Joan been gone? I don't remember.
I know, you do the math. Yeah, somebody
So
do
in
the
this
math.
picture here, Lois, in the middle, the oldest is Marianne. Yeah.
She's on the top. Marianne is at the top of the picture, yes.
Okay. Is at the top.
And Joni is over her right shoulder with the dimples. Well, they all had dimples except, oh, even Marianne does in the
Okay, I
picture.
recognize this as Joan.
That's
Joni here.
Joan. Oh God, was she a darling?
And Marianne, and this is
That's Nancy,
Nancy. Okay.
my flower girl, right, Mary Beth? Thank you.
And then
And
Jack, and then
Jack.
it was Susie and Ellie are not pictured here. They're not born
Yeah,
yet.
yeah, imagine. All raised, oh my goodness.
So anyway, this just kind of brings us back to where we started, with this picture here that I love so much. And then included in here, I have screenshots of a couple things you wrote to me, Lois, back in 2011, that have some more family history. Some of the things that you mentioned, but I wanted to add them in there so that you all, and then I intend to send this the slides that I made out of the pictures, and then also the recording that I'm making right now of our meeting together. I'll be sending out to family and encourage them to please forward it to whomever would be interested. But it's got you include a lot of very interesting stuff in this one here, which is more about family background going back to moving to the United States from Holland. And then this one here, I had asked you to share some remembrances of what life was like for you all during the Great Depression, and you have a lot of interesting things here about day-to-day life. Where you were living, and about the 50-pound block of ice that came every few days, and
when we were on
the back
vacation,
porch asking for food and things like that. So I wanted to include that in there because it's a lot of very.
This is lovely because with my memory at almost 90, I've forgotten a lot of these things till I read what I told you.
Yeah, so I'll send this out, in the next couple of days or so. So I just want to point out on these last couple pages that I have, because this is the last slide that I have, that these emails that you sent to me, which you point out there are a lot of typos as you're kind of just getting your thoughts down there, but I really appreciate you sharing that, because I want my kids and everybody else that would be interested to have this, to know this information.
Oh my gosh. That is just fantastic.
You're amazing, Andrew.
Thank you very much. It was fun to put together, and thank you, Lois, for sending those photographs to my mom, and then Mom for bringing them down so that I could get them scanned. And gosh, you hate to think there'd ever be something that would happen that would damage those photographs. I'm glad I at least have them in digital form now, so that generations and generations will be able to look back and then listen to our meeting and have some of the backstory.
Oh, it's wonderful.
We're so grateful to you, Andrew. You're amazing.
Oh, thank you. It was
Gosh.
glad we were finally able to make it happen.
Yeah, well, if anything else comes up with the family, I'll continue to let you and Rosemary
You did such a
know
great
about
job, Lois. I loved it.
Yeah, Lois, thank you so much. I'm so great that you remember so much and can share so many of the stories and things. That's timeless. That's great.
Well, you maybe got me just in time because
She's doing great, isn't she?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, she's too
It's-
hard on herself.
Yeah, wonderful to hear.
Rosemary, do you remember the last thing you said to me when we were with Mary Beth picking out her wedding dress? And we'd been to different places and she tried on several and we went all through this mine. And you said to me, can we cry now?
That's how I feel.
And I'm watching you now, and that's exactly right. You have to wait till it's all over, and then, oh my gosh, you've got someone by the heart strings.
Mhm. We love you, Aunt Rosemary. You've been
Such
such a big,
darling.
wonderful part of the story, right?
Oh,
Mom? In
yes.
this family.
Wife to my brother, who I adored, and mother to your three wonderful sons who have such lovely women and children in their family. Gosh, have we been blessed?
Lucky.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'll let everybody go, but it's been wonderful chatting with you the last
Mhm.
couple hours and,
Thank
you
for
know,
everything.
getting this recorded and,
Oh,
love seeing you both. Love all three of you, but you in particular, Mary Beth and Lois, who I don't get to see
all will
much.
be treasured.
Yes. Love you.
Okay, bye, dears.
All right,
Thank
enjoy the rest
you.
of your day. Love you all.